So one of the questions I really get asked a lot is about, first of all, does this kind of training that I'm presenting need daily training? And the answer is more or less yes. And second of all, that being the case, how do we establish a proper routine around this? And this is a rather nuanced topic because it can turn into a kind of too forced thing, a thing that brings stress and tension into your life, fitting training in amongst all the other activities. And this is actually counterproductive to the process that I'm presenting, which is about releasing tension and opening up and all the rest. So then we don't want to go too far down this forcing route, but we also can't just be too la-di-da about it. Much like the process itself, the discipline of practice needs a balance. If I'm too released with my discipline, if I don't care and I don't get to training each day, the practice collapses and the results will stagnate. You can spend a long time doing 2 or 3 days a week and not really get too far. It'll be a lot of time invested for not much return. On the flip side, if you force things too much, it can work for a time, but you'll glass ceiling at some point where everything is a little bit too pent up. You're too much in the wanting to do it well, in the trying really hard to be a good student, in really pushing the training. And this has a couple of byproducts. One, it's rigidity in the system that you can't not train, and that also stagnates, also kind of is like driving with the brakes on. It's like trying too hard. But it's also eventually going to lead to you like really not liking your training and things like this. So how do you find a way to balance that? First of all, we need to look at the motivation. Usually in someone who's motivated in such a way that they're forcing training, there's a kind of bunch of loaded assumptions coming with the training. Like, if I train like this, like a maniac, I'll finally get recognition I deserve. I'll finally be the superior human. If I train like this, I'll finally feel good about myself, and so on and so forth. All these kind of expectations that the training will make you not have human problems or make you superior to everyone else, something like this, some variation on this theme. And at its root, this kind of motivation is a motivation of fear of not being good enough, fear of not being recognized by the other, fear of not living up to your own potential. And that fear can really stagnate and really interfere with the process of ongoing unraveling, ongoing discovery that's inherent to this process. So we want to do our best to get away from that fear and towards a kind of curiosity. The curiosity is really about the discovery, the act of discovery. So all of these practices, each day you practice, it might be something small, but you're going to discover something about yourself. You're going to discover a tension that wasn't there, or a habit, or connect to a piece of yourself that's not normally connected, or something like this. You're going to slowly expose the hidden. And in this discovery, you can bring a real curiosity. You can bring a real like sense of like, whoa, that's really cool. I didn't know that about myself before. Oh, I didn't realize that was there, and now I know it's there, and so on and so forth. And so we need to bring this kind of explorer's mindset, or this curious mindset, to what we're doing here, to be able to explore it in a healthier way. In the start, this might look like just 5 minutes here and there. 5 minutes a day is more than enough to get going. If you've started training, one would assume you're curious enough about it. You've decided to look into it. You've decided to step up to the plate and do something about it and engage in an action. But very often what happens is people will start, someone will tell them they meant to do an hour a day. They go, right, they got on their hour a day, and that hangs around for 2, 3, 4 weeks if they're lucky. And then they miss one day and they're like, oh, and they don't get back to it. And then 6 months go past and like, oh, I'll have another crack, and rinse and repeat at that cycle. To stop this effect happening, it is much, much, much better to only do a few minutes a day. Start just engaging with the practice, nothing more. Take 5 minutes out of your day to actually just try any of the practices, the centering practice, any of the drills, and just see what happens. Just see what happens in a kind of curious way. Oh, I just tried this drill, and what did it actually do? How do I actually feel after doing this? This kind of curious connecting to what was discovered rather than a fear that if I don't do it, something bad's going to happen to me. To help mitigate this fear, it's good to know there are loads and loads of people in the world who never did this stuff and lived perfectly happy, healthy lives. And I dare say that a great deal of the people engaging with these practices are also kind of miserable sods. So the practice itself isn't inherently bringing of joy. Then just remember this every time you engage the practice. The practice won't give you joy if you're not engaging with it in a joyful and curious way. So try and find that 5 minutes a day where you set up your practice, where you just even start something. And even if it only goes for a minute, that's more than enough. In the start, you're looking for consistency. Can you just show up every single day? And, if you miss a day, it happens. You don't want to beat yourself up about it, but you do want to avoid that as much as you can. Missing a day just means you forgot about it for the whole day. If you, for 1 minute, remember your training and that you're meant to do it, and you even fight with yourself to get up and do it, but it doesn't eventuate, that still counts. That's still engaging with the training, even though you've actually run into your first resistance. It's very normal. And it'll take a bit of repetition to get past that. You'll have those days and then you'll miss it. And then the next day you're like, no, I'm going to have another go at this and see what happens. And as you repeat this, it gets easier and easier to maintain the 3 minutes, 5 minutes daily. The next step after this is to actually stretch the session. And when you're in this kind of 3 to 5 minutes a day level of practice, it really doesn't matter what practice you're doing. I'd probably recommend just the basic standing centering posture, the Wuji posture, if you're particularly interested in internal arts. But any practice will do. It's just about doing something. At some point, you start to feel like you want to do a little bit more, and maybe you start getting up to 10 to 15, 20 minutes a day. This is a really nice place to be at. Just be sure that on the inevitable day where you miss doing your 20 minutes, you still try and do the 3 minutes or the 5 minutes. Feeling that it's okay to regress the practice down to like a maintenance mode to just keep it light is totally fine. It won't damage your practice, and in fact, it will only do good things for your practice to do, half an hour for 16, 17 days in a row, and then on one day do 3 minutes, and then continue doing your half an hour. It's like a little link that connects the time before and the time after, just that you showed up on that day. So try and keep that alive and don't feel guilty about regressing your practice. All of us have some sort of crazy lives where this day is inevitable, so don't stress too much about it. Once you're getting up to the point where you're doing 20 minutes, half an hour a day, and it feels pretty easy, you actually have some optionality in here. And this is also what I wanted to talk about, how to structure this training period to be fruitful, especially in approaches like mine, which have a lot of exercises. Most of my beginners within about 3 weeks have too many exercises to do, too much stuff to choose from. And part of what I teach them is how to select exercises and how to cycle through exercises. So you've got plenty of programming ideas in the world of fitness and so on, but the way the internal arts are approached aren't really about reps and sets. It's more about this kind of like consistent, lengthy engagement where you're doing single practices for 5, 10, 15 minutes without a break. Whether it be Jiben Gong, a kind of basic fundamental exercise, or a meditation, or a Tai Chi form or something, it's usually continuous. You don't do Tai Chi form for like 3 minutes, stop, have a break, grab a water, continue the form on from there for another 3 minutes. It doesn't work like that at all. It must be continuous. So once you're at the point where you have this continuous slab, you actually need to learn how to structure this slab. And I really like to think of this time where I'm practicing as a bubble in my day where I'm specifically and directly putting time aside for me to learn about myself. And inside this bubble, I can do that learning in a number of ways. It might be a physical exploration of how I'm connected and how the hands connect to the feet or something like that, or making things stronger or stretching or opening, whatever. It might be a more felt sensory exploration, as in a lot of the energetic work. It might be a meditative exploration, but in this bubble, whatever goes in there, I'm going to do something for myself. It's not to be distracted with the outside world, it's to turn my attention inwardly. That's step one. So have this idea of the bubble, and you want to maintain the bubble, but what's within the bubble can swap and change. I can do, in my bubble, I can do one exercise for 2 weeks and then take that out and put a new exercise in that bubble and do that for 2 or 3 weeks and take that out, and so on and so forth. I have my bubble that's consistent, but what's inside the bubble changes. That's doing one thing every day. Of course, we need to start to get more complex because we often have many things on the burner. And this is where I like to think about projects. Each person is going to have their kind of current sticking point, their current weak point, whatever that may be. It might be a gammy shoulder, it might be a structural misalignment, it might be that the breathing is not so easy, it might be a crazy mind. And so we want to first populate our bubble with our current primary project, whatever that may be. And so this starts to be the foreground. It's the thing that I'm going to touch upon every single day, that I'm going to, as part of my practice, I'm definitely going to do every day. So let's say I'm working on my shoulders. In my bubble, I have 2/3 of that bubble always dedicated to working on my shoulder, moving through exercises. You know, maybe I'm doing the shoulder program like what I have. And so week 1 is this, week 2 is that, and so on and so forth. And in each of those practices, I have 2 or 3 exercises to do. So my bubble of my shoulder contains 3 exercises, and I do that every single day. And every week I move on to a new set of shoulder exercises. But my shoulder project lasts for maybe 3 months. Then once I'm done with that project, I can take it out and put a new project in. Maybe I'm going to work on my flexibility, or maybe I'm going to work on my breathing, or something like this. Then that becomes a central project for the next 2 or 3 months. And of course, lots of different drills within that project working towards making that thing better. And then you just want to get used to cycling projects in and out based on your current weak link or what your teacher has told you you need to work on, or something like this. Then, as well as your central project, I always find it nice to have what I call orbiting projects. These are things that I'm just kind of keeping on my radar. Maybe I'm learning new exercises, so I'll try the exercise one day and put it down for a few days, then try it again later. It's not my central task at this point of time, but it's something I like to play with. Maybe I'm doing it 2 or 3 times a week. And so as well as my central project, which is like the planet that keeps everything together, that keeps the consistency, I have these little moments where I just spend 10 minutes playing with weights, or 5 minutes running around, or whatever, you know, things that appear maybe only a couple of times a week. And maybe there's 2 or 3 of these kind of orbiting practices that are traveling alongside my central project. It's meditating because I feel like it's a day of meditating, even though meditation isn't currently my central project. It's breathing just because I've had a stressful week and I need to breathe to calm the system down. It's doing a drill that I really like that makes me feel excellent, but I don't really need to work on, but I like the drill, and so on and so forth. So we have this bubble. Every day I'm practicing for anywhere between 2 minutes and 5 hours. The bubble can change size, but it's there every day. Inside the bubble, I have a central project, which is also there every day. But the project can change every couple of weeks or couple of months, depending on what you're working on. And then circling this kind of coming in and out of the bubble is the orbiting practices, which are just little things I'm playing with at the time. I go to a workshop, so I play with a few new things from that workshop, but they don't interfere with my central practice. If I don't have the time, I drop all my orbits and only do my central practice. If I really don't have the time, I shorten my central practice to be maybe 2 minutes long, but I still do it every day. So with this model, we can actually like scale up and scale down our practice quite easily. We can engage with things lightly, as in the orbiting practices where they come and go, but we don't lose that consistency because we always have our central practice as well. And I even get to update the central practice. I can, after 3 months of working on my shoulder, cool, I put it down and I work on my hips or something else. So then the middle, the kind of anchor practice is another word I've used for this central practice. The anchor practice that keeps everything going every day, keeps the practice alive, and it's the thing I'm kind of most passionate about discovering or resolving at this point in time. And then the other practices are just kind of tacked onto that, and you'll find if you have your anchor practice, your central practice working reasonably solidly, then the orbiting practices are super easy to add on. But if you don't have that central practice working solidly, I wouldn't worry about having too many different things going on. I just work on getting that central practice working. So your bubble is there every day, that it's got something in it, that the bubble is maintained every single day. So it's a reasonably simple frame to put around practice, but it also helps you deal with a lot of guilt of not getting to things, because if you feel like you're working on something, especially something important to you at any point in time, then you'll always feel like your training is really productive and nice. And you can always do the other things as orbiting practices if you really kind of feel like playing with them, or bring them in as a central project at one point in time, and spend 2 or 3 months working on that particular topic to help bring it to life. This way, you've got consistent practice every day that isn't interfered with, isn't interrupted. Even on your busiest day, you still do 5 minutes or something like this, which keeps the thread going over the long term. And there's a lovely feeling after 20 years or something like this of not missing practice that can't be replaced with any quick fix. So you've got this thread going. In amongst this thread, you've got some projects, and you've constantly got new projects. Once you finish one project, you can work on the next project, and you can even have big cycles where you go through a number of projects over a whole year and then come back to the first one to see how it's been affected by everything you've done in that time, and so on. And you also get the variety of having interesting things to work on here and there that don't have a seriousness about them. The orbiting practices are really things we do for fun or to keep this curious aspect alive. Sometimes the anchor practice can be a little bit, of a getting in the muck and kind of clearing something out, like cleaning your room, and having fun things to do where you just grab random practices that particularly that you really enjoy, can really help keep the central project alive. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is that we all have once we've been practicing a while, we all have practices that we love and practices that we hate but we know are good for us. Usually the ones we love are the ones that we're already good at. We go to where we're kind of naturally inclined towards doing things we're really good at, really, really getting perfection in that particular move that you've done a million times. And it's not so fun to do exercises that you're garbage at. And these exercises can be a little heavy to confront. There's some part of you that knows it's necessary to do that exercise, but it's really like, yeah, I'll get to it at some point. It's like, this kind of shadow looming over the back there. And so you can also start to be a little bit intelligent with this depending on how you're feeling. If you're having just a rotten day and everything's not going your way, and whatever, you've had problems at work and family dramas and all the normal things that happen in a day-to-day life if you're not a monk. If you've had one of these days and you're really low energy, it's a really good idea to not do a confrontational practice. Do something that you enjoy, do something that is easy and you're good at and that you feel good doing on these days, and that will lift your spirits and get you back into a better mood, and hopefully bring some energy back too. On the other hand, if you're beaming with vitality and everything feels amazing and awesome, this is the day where you want to go and get in the muck, get in the deep, dark, gross stuff, that injury you've been meaning to rehab that you haven't gotten to, that emotional blockage that you know is there, and you know a particular exercise triggers but you don't like doing it because it's difficult to deal with where it comes up. These kind of practices, the long arduous practices where you've been meaning to try out doing your standing practice for an hour without a stop but you just haven't gotten around to it yet, do these on the days where you're just like beaming with vitality, where you're full of energy and you're ready to tackle the world. It's just a basic common sense thing, but you'd be surprised how many people force themselves to do shitty practices on days where they're already having a really bad time, and it's just not that good an idea. You'll probably just make your day worse, basically, and you won't actually digest any of the things you confront. So just avoid it and do something nice on that day. That way, one, you get to do something nice, and two, you get to keep your practice going instead of putting things down entirely. So they're just a few concepts that I use to model my practice around. Hopefully you find them useful. If you have any ideas or any frameworks that you use to help yourself or your students have a daily practice, please throw them in the comments below. And if you have any kind of ideas or responses to the things I've presented too, I'd also love to have your feedback. So please also comment below. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more or support my work, head on over to my website, craigmallet.com. You're also welcome to join my community, which can be found at community.craigmallet.com or via the menu on my main website. I generally have a number of services available. If you'd like some help, just reach out. I have a student program, I have online courses, I have workshops and private consultations, all available to any who would want it. As always, to appease the algorithm gods, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and or share.